Can farms produce to the maximum and still reduce greenhouse gas emissions? This is an article by phys.org, Kristen Malley Dean, Agron National Laboratory. Today's article. Decarbonizing agriculture is critical for the U.S. to reach net zero emissions by the year 2050. A new data-driven approach looks at practices that are good for the earth and profitable for farmers. The world relies on American farmers to do much more than set its tables. In addition to producing food for people and animals, American farmers produce feedstocks for biofuel production. In the process of doing this, the agricultural industry contributes about 10% of U.S. greenhouse gas GHG emissions. Because the amount of land dedicated for agriculture is limited, farmers need to find more ways to operate efficiently, sustainably, and profitably while also reducing GHG emissions. With new practices, farmers can make farms a net sink of carbon dioxide, helping the U.S. reach its goal of achieving net zero emissions by the year 2050. Sustainable intensification is a two-pronged approach many think could help. It tries to optimize land use and management practices for maximum farmland productivity. At the same time, it tries to minimize associated environmental impact. The trick is finding the right balance between the two objectives. Scientists who specialize in agroeconomic systems modeling and life cycle analysis, LCA, from Colorado State University, CSU, and the U.S. Department of Energy, DOE, Agron National Laboratory took a new analytic approach to the issue in a recent study of corn and soy farming in Iowa. They co-authored an article, a multi-product landscape life cycle assessment approach for evaluating local climate mitigation potential, in the June 20th issue of the Journal of Cleaner Production. Quote, the concept of sustainable intensification of farming was applied into more broad-scale landscape application, end quote, said one of the article's co-authors, Ho-Young Kwon, a principal environmental scientist at Agron's Energy Systems and Infrastructure Analysis ESIA division. He said, we considered productivity and GHG emissions, attempted to optimize land management tactics and products, and investigated different trade-offs that improve the land and land productivity. For example, farmers can clear and repurpose corn crop residue or stover for biofuel, and about a percentage of stover can remain in the soil for valuable nutrient and carbon sources for future crops. Farmers can plant cover crops during the winter or fallow season to supplement removed stover. The authors took into account energy, which has an emissions cost of planting of cover crops, to holistically address net benefits of stover removal and cover crop planting. Farmers can also reduce how much land they till after a growing season ends, which lessens decay and reduces the amount of CO2 that emanates from the soil. However, the farmer has to till some of the land to be ready for the next growing season. While some farmers already follow one or even all three of these practices, the scientists from Agron believe a better understanding of their impact will motivate more to do so for real benefit. They said, our approach gives a holistic perspective and looks at the perspective of the farmer. What are all the products that can be produced on the land, and what are the sustainability benefits, said co-author Troy Hawkins, group leader of fuel and products in Agron's ESIA division. He said farming can be a risky, low-margin exercise. Profitability will always be a primary focus. However, sustainability has value that may be unrecognized. How can we put all that together with changes to land management practices to make farming more sustainable and improve farmers' costs? The scientists took all at the trade-offs and synergies between sustainable intensification and carbon sequestering conservation measurements in a real-world scenario. They used two models, day scent and the greenhouse gases, regulated emissions, and energy use in technologies, GREET for short. LCA, to evaluate a farming area upstream of Des Moines, Iowa. The DayCent model represents daily flows of carbon, nitrogen, and water between the atmosphere, vegetation, and soil in natural and agricultural ecosystems. The scientists relied on it to evaluate GHG emissions in corn ethanol production and the effects of residue harvest. They used GREET to account for emissions associated with farm operations and the use of harvested corn grain, soybean, and corn stover as feedstocks for biofuel production. GREET is widely used across industries to evaluate energy consumption, GHG emissions, air pollutant emissions, and water consumption associated with biofuel supply chains and other transport and energy technologies. Fellow co-author Michael Wang, our Grown's Interim Division Director for Energy Systems and Infrastructure, is a primary architect of GREET. According to the study, harvesting 30% of corn stover for biofuel production would increase farm revenues, double net profitability, and increase overall biofuel production from the landscape by 17 to 20%. Removal of the stover would also mitigate GHG somewhat, but it reduced the baseline amount of good carbon in the soil by 40%. In comparison, integrated approaches that include winter cover, cropping, and/or tillage intensity reduction would increase carbon in the soil, improve farm profitability, and mitigate more GHGs. Hawkins said, "We focused on corn and soy, but our approach could be extended to other crops. Many farms today are large industrial farms that are high-tech and rely much more on high-resolution data. We want to give farmers, regional planners, and others in agricultural management a tool to calculate how to use land substantially and get the most value out of the land. This will further both profitability and environmental goals." And this is by Agron National Laboratory, Trung H. Nguyen, and colleagues on phys.org. By Christian Malley-Dean, Agron National Laboratory. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. And these are videos from, as we know, Creative Commons Pixabay videos. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.